The divinity is within you. Or wait, honestly, time for an honest question. Is it really so? Now, the point is, we have been hearing this quote, I can say, the quote that says, the divine or the divinity is within you. Now, this is kind of a curious question, I can say, because many people will be wondering where exactly will the divinity be, or where exactly the divinity is. Now, the point is, this is kind of confusing to some people, especially if they're thinking in terms of, too much physicality, because when someone says within, they obviously feel or point towards a certain location or something, right? It has to be a geographical location, either within the body or somewhere on this planet or in somewhere that can be dimensionally located. Now the point is, to ignorant people, right, this feels as a sense of empowerment because they, you know, unconscious people, those who live in still the clutches of ignorance, they will feel empowered in a way because divinity is within them, right? So this can feel easily as a justification for them to do bad deeds. Like, honestly, history has kind of shown. But the point is, ultimately, the divinity is not necessarily, like physically within. Now, well, is this so or is this not so? What can, introspection show us? Because ultimately, divinity is, well, if you look at religion, it says divinity is all around, right? Divinity is within everything. But then comes the quote, divinity is within you. Well, obviously, if it is everywhere, it's also within you, right? But it's more like we are part of divinity, right? We are kind of an extension of said divinity, and well, I'm not speaking about God specifically or any deity, I'm just speaking about the forces that allowed this universe to be created. Because, well, people may call it in a simpler way God or, any other deities, right, representing the religions of the world, but ultimately, if one puts them together, there's basically a same idea. There is something far stronger than us, right? Something far beyond us, and well, it has allowed this creation, right, to make manifest, right? It just, brought this into, full existence. Now, the point is the divinity actually within us? Well, physically, it's not necessarily within us because we are part of divinity. We are an extension of divinity, so technically, we are divinity. Now, in the current state that we are living, we are definitely not divinity itself, but consider ourselves, like if the divinity is a huge organism, right? Let's say the whole universe is divinity, right? We are just a tiny cell. Each and every one of us, we are just a tiny cell minding our own business, just like everything else is. Or a minor part of a cell because, well, we live on a planet. And this planet is like a big cell and we are, the, let's say, atoms or different aspects of it, right? The problem that usually stems with misunderstandings is that, well, as I've been saying, there's always a personal truth. Now, the point is, people kind of mistake a personal truth for a personal belief because a truth is something that cannot be combated, right? It cannot be changed from a person's perspective because a personal truth comes from awareness, right, from having experienced. Everything one experiences is their own truth, right? If someone goes to war and they survive the war irrespective of how much they have spent there, when they come back home, right, any people can, especially these Hufflepuffs nowadays, or whatever you want to call them. I usually, like those people with very fragile egos that, special snowflakes, whatever you want to call them. These people, many of them will say that, hey, life is a misery, or, there are those who say life is all about positivity, right? But you can't convince someone who's been through war that life is necessarily misery, right? Just because you're sitting in your home in between four walls and then you're imagining that life is misery, right? Someone who's gone to war and, they've seen a lot of their close ones die, perish, in some of the most hideous ways possible, right? Or have faced, the execution of their friends, or, like all the horrors of war, you can't convince them, right? Just like you can't convince anyone who knows, the universal truth that, for example, water freezes at 0 degrees. Now, it may be -4 because usually, like pure water freezes at 0 degrees, but okay, scientifically it's somewhere around there. That cannot be denied. Again, this applies on this planet mostly because other planets may have their own physics laws that may be similar or not to ours. Now, the point about, personal truth is something that it is well founded because, well, it's founded on realization, not on pure belief, because belief means accepting something without necessities for proof, and belief comes from as a result of unconsciousness, of impulse, right? Someone needs something better, right? It's a necessity. Someone needs something better as a guidance, so they will usually follow the first thing. It's kind of the moth effect, as I call it, because, a moth will easily, follow the light, right? You close that bulb and you turn on another bulb, the moth will simply go that way, right? So it's just an impulse, right? It's an impulse of following that which suits them the most. That's a problem with, beliefs and, well, such ideas. They can be detrimental, yes, but the point is, a truth is something that has to be experienced. Now, when it comes to a divinity, right, many people believe that, if they have, especially people who live unconsciously, once they have a very bright idea, many people feel God chosen or something like that, right? They feel as if they've been elevated. The point is, many people miss one point. One, divinity never cowers itself to you. Divinity doesn't lower itself to you. Divinity is absolute, right? You have to reach a level of absolution to become one with divinity, right? The angels ain't gonna come to you. If you're beseeching spirits to come and help you, well, the only spirits you'll find is probably, well, are probably those you'll find in beer, right, and alcohol. It ain't called spirits for nothing, after all, because English is an occult language, and a lot of the words and phrases in there have their own hidden senses, but they are for people, who wake up and realize that there is always more sense to things than the initial one that, it's fed down your throat. So, when it comes to divinity, right, one has to transcend physicality. One has to understand different other things, right? There is always a better way to eat, a better way to keep one's spine erect, and, many other things that together can help someone go beyond the limitations of impulses. Because, well, the physical body has its own needs, but if you allow those needs to rule you, well, you're technically on the back seat of the car you are driving, or the vehicle, if you can say so. Because the physical body has, an autopilot mind which was designed to function in case, your awareness suffers something, right? In case anything happens. But it doesn't mean that the autopilot has to be used all the time. So where exactly is the divinity located, right? Because as I was saying, many people say, well, I feel, empowered because the divinity is within me. Yes, you have read that in a book, most likely, that the divine is within you, and New Age spiritualists, among a lot of dumb things they are promoting, they are also saying this, that, the divine is within you. And, this aggressive way of advertising things makes it sound as if you, aka the one who's listening, is always the chosen one, the exalted one, right? And this promotes a lot of ignorance, because once you feel that you're exalted, you're automatically going to feel that the other ones are not exalted, or only those who have listened to that specific source are exalted as well, right? It's a sense of belonging, a lack of belonging. You want to identify yourself with something because ideally, right, the ideal life for you is that you seek to be the slave of something. You want something to rule you because you're not willing to take responsibility of your own life. So therefore, you're always willing for something to rule you, right, to give you the hints, the points, or even the orders that you will, willingly follow. Now, the point about this is, well, this is an aspect of ignorance, and a lot of people, well, suffer the consequences because ignorance equals suffering. Now, the point about feeling exalted is many people kind of fail to understand that that book is basically, meant for everyone, right? And in order to avoid such confusions, it is much better to use an expression like the divinity is within you all, right? Not within you specifically, right? Because when you say is within you, ignorant people will most likely perceive it that it's only within them and a few others, right? Because people who are ignorant, they will always impulsively accept a certain idea. They will identify with it, and the problem is, well, once they identify with it, everyone else is somewhat an enemy, or if they're not now, they will be pretty soon, because, well, if they're not now your enemies, they will be pretty soon, because identification is the first, well, if is a very powerful tool of separation. Because think about people who believe in something, right? They entrust their life energies even into something, right? They believe in a certain football team, or in a certain religious belief, or in anything, right? In a music genre, right? And it's not bad, but the problem is once they identify too much with it, everything else becomes like an enemy, right? And people hate one another just because someone else is not listening to the same music genre as they do, or someone else likes another, basketball team, or another sports team, or another sport. It's always this idea of separation, because this is easily fueled by a sense of survival, right? And this case is a survival of the self, right? Imbalances in the third chakra, which also would be similar in a way to the idea of separation, because you're identified with other things, right? And these imbalances always lead to a running away from the responsibility of doing whatever you should be doing to improve your own life. So is the divinity somewhere in your physical body, or in your emotional bodies, or in the sense? Well, technically the energy that each of our bodies is created is part of divinity. So basically the divinity is not within you specifically, it is within each and every one of us, and within each and everything that this planet has, from the minutest things to the largest. So the point is, ignorant people cannot understand that literally everything is divine, right? Everything also works in a kind of a divine favor, right? In a kind of a divine sense, although I wouldn't call it a sense, right? There is also a problem when it comes to spirituality, right? Spirituality has this habit, right? Instead of calling God or Allah or different other gods, right? The spiritual community, or spiritual preachers say that there is the source, right? Now they kind of mispronounce or misuse this word in a way because it induces confusion, because what they want to say is the source of creation, right? Because all religions have something in common. Once there was something like one point of physicality which expanded into the whole, right? And also science is also supporting this through the point of Big Bang, right? The T0, the time zero moment, when everything, the very first moment that something went into realization, right, into existence, and then the spread of it, right, until it became what it is now. But the problem with source is that, well, source is kind of a pinned aspect, right? It's something that is there but in one single location, right? When you say a source of light, you say a source, right, which is a single object or a single power, right? That creates light, let's say, and it's always located in one single place, right? It's pinned to that place just like stars are pinned to the sky. Well, according to our vision, they look as if they are pinned to the sky. And the point is that source is kind of a wrong thing unless you use it as the source of creation, one may say, but still that may be wrong as well because source means one direction, right? As if creation came from one single source. But what if there are multiple sources of creation, right? Because there were obviously a multitude of aspects, right, that induced creation, right? Just like you don't create something from one single thing, right? Most likely in video games, but in reality you don't create something from one other thing necessarily, right? There's always more materials. Even if you process one single raw material, there will always be several other things as well, because even in order to process that, you need tools, right, to process that single material. So those tools also need materials for their own creation, right? And those also need the industry, and the industry also requires its own tools to process those, right? And first of all, to extract them. So the point is, well, why not call it creation instead? Because ultimately everything is creation. The whole life process is just creation, right? We humans have been playing this silly game of, you know, uh, life and death, and have created this hideous concept of death, which basically doesn't even exist because there is basically no such thing as death. Yes, a physical body, everything that is physical will be shed, but ultimately the physical is only a, how to call it? It is only a vehicle used to experience a certain set of, well, let's say to experience a certain life, right? And people fuss so much about the body, right? People fear death so much, but at the same time they are so invested in their misery. They are so invested in conducting self-destruction because, well, ultimately that's kind of the only thing they know, right? They are so invested in conducting self-destruction, they're indulging in all sorts of self-destructive behaviors, but at the same time they are hating, death because, well, this is a narcissistic feature. Because when you have a narcissistic trait, right, which is kind of a will for immortality, right, you want to live eternally, but the point is you are seeing death as this unfair aspect, right, that's gonna take everything you have accomplished, right? Because ignorant people will kind of end up feeling that they are number one. Again, just like lower functional narcissism, it is just an impulse, right? It is a justification to support the emptiness, to support a lie, right? That covers the emptiness of what they are. Now, the point about, existence and life is there is only life, right? And it's very silly to, conduct self-destruction at each and every moment, but at the same time fear death. Because when you conduct self-destructive behaviors, you're just hastening your death. This is just a project, it's just a process, right? That's going on along with your life. You can say you're living life, or you are slowly approaching your death. They are just perfect synonyms, right? So the divine simply is fully unconscious. It doesn't know about your existence, and it don't even know if there is a head of creation, or just like there are in our society, right? A head of a project, or something that rules it. There is most likely in this universe a code that allows it to exist, and that code is simply run again and again and again. Whatever created that, well, it's always gonna be beyond the mind. Therefore, do not bother yourself with understanding life, because if you want to understand things, you're clearly not taking into account the meaning of understand. The word is understand because it just makes some logical sense to your discernment. It makes a logical sense to your mind, but still you're understanding, right? You're not on the point, you're somewhere close to the point, because the mind cannot comprehend everything. According to yogic sciences, if there are 114 chakras that represent life itself, the mind is represented by the physical body, right? It's only specific to the physical body, and, well, hence it is represented by just 3 chakras, right? And if it is represented by 3 chakras out of the 114, one has to be a big fool to believe that through only 3 chakras, which most likely won't even be balanced in a way, or let's say opened up correctly, right? The point is, well, one has to be a fool to believe that through only 3 chakras one can understand the whole world, right? So the divinity is within each and everything, within each and every aspect of this life. The physical body is also a representative of the divine, because the way you look, the way you think, is also a representative of the uniqueness of divine. Okay, the divine simply splits itself more and more into shards, and sooner or later all those shards will join back into divinity, right? Because that is the whole purpose of life. You experience a whole spectrum of possibilities and existences, right? And, well, it's just like playing video games, right? You never identify yourself with the character you're playing with that much, or you do for a short while and then you kind of ditch the game. It's kind of the same thing, right? So hopefully this video was enlightening enough. Hopefully this provided a few ideas of introspection. Hopefully you have enjoyed, and, well, feel free to share your own ideas and points. You are appreciated. Take care of yourselves, become more introspective, and you will see that things that you've been following, well, they are just there, within you, waiting and hoping that you will, understand them. You are appreciated. Take care of yourselves. Ferenjan Board signing out.